Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter Hai. My guest today is Kai-Fu Lee, the chairman and chief executive officer of Sinovation Ventures and the president of Sinovation Ventures Artificial Intelligence Institute. He's based in Beijing, China. Sinovation Ventures is a leading venture capital firm focused on developing the next generation of Chinese high-tech companies. Prior to founding Sinovation in 2009, Kai-Fu was the president of Google China, and he also held senior executive roles at Microsoft, SGI, and Apple. He's the author of the new book, AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future, which we'll cover in some depth in this conversation. I last interviewed Kai-Fu in 2018 after the publication of his book, AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. Kai-Fu, welcome back to Technovation.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, Kai-Fu, I wanted to begin by congratulating you on your new book, AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future. Which is just coming out and a great read. I certainly recommend it to everyone who's watching and listening. I wonder if you could talk, first of all, how did you choose 20 years out as the time horizon? AI is one of these developments where there's all sorts of opinions as to how fast things will advance, how far out the most significant advances will be. And so there's some people who are, playing, hypothesizing, even investing for many decades out. Why was 20 years an appropriate time horizon from your perspective?
20 years is a period of time where a lot of things can happen. Think about 20 years ago, there was no mobile internet, no iPhone. Had we 20 years ago been given a vision of what we can do today with technology, it would sound quite fantastic. So it's long enough for a fantastic vision to be presented, but it's not so long that people drift into pure imagination on things that are highly speculative. So I wanted to paint that vision in a way that people who don't understand technology can get a sense about what excitement and also what dangers are ahead. So there is more realistic view of AI as opposed to a lot of the misinformed or just uninformed people because AI sounds complex, but it's really not that complex. And I wanted to tell a 20-year out vision. So that's why I picked the number.
I get it. And your co-author on this is Chen Qiufan, who is a science fiction novelist. So very interesting choice for a co-author. You and he have very different perspectives that you bring to this. Talk a bit about embarking on this journey with him. How did the two of you decide to partner on this?
Yeah, so I started thinking about writing that vision, but it looked really boring from a pure descriptive form of the vision. And then I thought if this could be done through storytelling, that would be great. And also I saw the impact of the likes of Black Mirror had on people. And I wondered if we could do sort of a white mirror, a similar kind of futuristic vision, roughly similar time frame, maybe a little more grounded by scientifically doability, and more constructive as opposed to too much dystopia. So that was the original thought. And then I thought of a former Google colleague. We both actually worked at Google. He was in sales, and he has a background. He was, I think, one of the top people who got into Beijing University in the literature department. And he has become, since leaving Google, we left around the same time, but since leaving some 10 years ago, he's completely had a change of career and become one of the top science fiction writers in China. And so I thought we already know him. He's a good person. He understands technology reasonably well. And but I wasn't sure if a science fiction writer would be willing to be constrained by me in the sense of not writing using any technologies that wouldn't be doable in 20 years. But he happily agreed. And we both have a constructive outlook on the future of humanity. And it just really clicked.
That's very interesting. And you tell, as the subtitle suggests, you tell the story in 10 visions. And right. I'd love to get into some of those in a moment. Okay. But how did you come up with the visions? How did you and Chen Qiufan develop what was worthy of the 10 visions at the outset?
Yeah. So we had 4 goals of mixing into 10 stories. The reason we picked 10 was the publisher said, hey, you got to have 10 stories. You can't have 7. You can't have 12. It's got to be 10. So that was given. And then so he and I worked on 4 different constraints. First, I wanted each story to cover some aspect of technology or externalities, impact, benefits, problems, issues of technology, like computer vision, natural language processing, and the quantum computing and things like that. So we needed to fit technologies into 10 buckets. Secondly, the technologies had to be ordered from basic to advanced so that the reader can improve his or her knowledge of the technology as they read along. Third, I wanted them applied to 10 different industries. So manufacturing, healthcare, retail, and so on, so people can see how it impacts all the industries. And lastly, Qiufan, my co-author, wanted to make it in 10 different countries so that the cultural diversity makes it clear AI impacts everyone, no matter what country one lives in. So we mixed these 4 elements. So it's a very challenging puzzle to fit everything into 10 stories, but we did it.
Kai-Fu, there's a lot that has been written about the potential impact of AI on the future of work, the future of jobs, the possibility of it eliminating large swaths of jobs. And you are one certainly who highlights the potential impact of AI in your own work as well. In your book, several of your visions are associated with this theme. I think of Twin Sparrows, Job Savior, Dreaming of Plenitude, 3 of the 10 visions. Each of them have a commentary on the future of work and jobs. I wonder if you can maybe pull the thread through from across those stories and share some perspectives on what you believe the role that AI will play in the future of work and the future of jobs.
Sure. So my view is that in the short term, we have a serious challenge because AI will do repetitive and routine work. And those jobs and tasks will be replaced. So there will be people rotating out of work looking for new work. So what work will they take on? What training is needed? That's sort of the short-term challenge. Long-term, I'm optimistic that we will redefine work in a sense that work ought to be not what fills time and makes us work hard, because that's the formula for routine work. But work should be what's satisfying to us and gives us self-actualization, sense of contribution. And how do we evolve towards that? And then the third element is that implies education needed to be changed. So the students should stop memorizing rote learning, and they should be more taught into individualized and becoming creative, compassionate, and good at teamwork and communication, the soft skills, and not as much of the subject matter learning, which AI can beat us. So those were the 3 elements. So one story, Job Savior, talks about the first element, which is AI job displacement. So routine jobs were becoming displaced at the 20-year horizon, one at a time. Entry-level accountant, reporter, lawyer jobs are being replaced. Senior people still had a great way to contribute. But the big problem is who will pay for the people who are replaced and need to be to receive social benefit and become retrained. So we created this new type of profession called the job reallocator. And their job was to take over all the laid off people from a company and help them find jobs in an individualized matching training kind of way. But one of the challenges they face is people get reallocated the job, then that job gets displaced too. So how do we deal with this continual problem? And it became such a challenge, plus the issue that in the pyramid of jobs, entry-level jobs are first replaced by AI. Entry-level jobs in finance, HR, legal, and so on. Yet, if you remove the entry-level layer, how does anyone advance his or her career and become better and become superstars. So the idea that the job reallocators had was, why don't we give people virtual jobs? So they think they're working, but they're not, or they're working modestly and AI recorrects all their work because AI does a better job, but we'll let them work anyway so that they can have a feeling of contribution. At the same time, they're being watched for potential of promotion, individualized jobs, and over time, many will find what they want to do, but the rest, at least they have a feeling that they're doing jobs, not as a permanent solution, but just as a way to control the social dissatisfaction if too many people felt like they were unable to contribute to society. So is that kind of virtual job and retraining work? That's the first part. The second point is that we need to elevate ourselves to a different type of work. I think people don't inherently have a need to work as we define it today, but people do have a need for understanding self-worth and seeing contribution and achieving self-actualization. So can we use this opportunity as AI takes over routine work, really help people find in their heart what they want to do? So the last story, Dreaming of Plenitude, is a story of how the society is channeled towards having people becoming rewarded as they contribute to making others feel good, or contribute to finding something they're passionate about and can individually make a contribution in. And the changes that's required are really a different measure of success, not just in money and having good jobs, but also in some new, maybe AI-based currency and reward system. So that's kind of the second direction. And the third one is education. How do teachers and AI work symbiotically to help kids discover what they love? And how does that combination through AI as a teacher companion, perhaps a virtual reality character that becomes a companion, pal, and friend, and trusted and liked and maybe even loved by the child, to be taught things that needed to be taught in the way that is best absorbed. So the child loves basketball, the math problems are rephrased as basketball problems. If the child loves a superhero, then his or her pal is a superhero, and the education is gamified. And yet a human teacher still exists as a mentor, a coach, and someone who programs the AI to maximize whatever the child needs individually. So that describes the three elements kind of to move humanity forward. I don't think 20 years would be enough to reinvent education or to transition currency from money to some other currency. But I think it may be we can make some progress and show the beginning of shift in those directions.
And this harkens, even your description harkens lessons that you've talked about, the 3 R's necessary for societies to contemplate as they think about the changes that will come relative to AI: relearning, recalibrating, and what you refer to as renaissance. I'm hearing echoes of some of the messages you have there in what you described in those visions.
Yes. So relearning is learn a new skill set. So what skill sets are needed? There are creative jobs needed, but maybe not that many of them are available. Not everybody can become a super creative scientist or artist or CEO. However, there are many service jobs needed because AI does not have feeling, compassion, and people don't want AI to be their companion, health service provider, teacher, nurse, and so on. So retraining into those service jobs is probably the best way to shift the routine non-service jobs into still perhaps routine, but human touch jobs. That's the relearning. Recalibrate means people need to make a shift in their jobs. Perhaps they need to use new tools, Perhaps reporters need to use AI tools to discover stories, and perhaps investment professionals need to work with AI on the quantitative elements. So embrace the new AI tools as jobs are elevated to a different level to let people do what they do best and rely on AI for the quantitative. And also jobs like, scientists would rely on AI tools to discover even more drugs. And also doctors may become more of a compassionate caregiver, be connecting to the patient, winning the trust with AI doing the diagnosis. So that's the recalibrate. And then lastly, renaissance. It means many new jobs will be created and reinvented. For the artistic-minded, AI and VR tools will allow painting in 3D spaces and making art that wasn't before possible. 3D printing, similarly, will bring such capabilities. I think on the more technology side, AI will allow someone to kind of at the top of the food chain be the programmer of AI and invent kind of the next generation of human machine and human interface. So a lot of new jobs that didn't exist before will blossom, and all of these three R's together should definitely provide enough exciting and satisfying work to keep us happy and content and feel contributing. They may or may not be the same, 8 to 10 hours a day job that pays money, that makes us feel like we've done the work, we got the money, we can feed the family. But they're more of, hey, maybe we don't need to worry as much about money because AI has done all the work in the world for almost no marginal additional costs. We can do what we love to do, and we are liberated from routine job, and we can feel we're contributing and making a difference. So that's kind of the three R's to help us through the transition.
You also write about a variety of externalities. For example, how technology, how artificial intelligence can be used to shape people's opinions. And there's been a lot that's been written about just this happening. Talk a bit about some of the, there are some threads again pulled through multiple of the visions you create, like the Isle of Happiness and the Golden Elephant, which leverage some of the ideas related to this. Would you mind sharing some examples of that, please?
Sure. This is probably the biggest concern of AI today. People are concerned about how large internet companies are using all the data and all the knowledge they have about individuals to target individuals with content in a way that helps make them make money, but maybe don't serve to the well-being of the individuals. Maybe the content we're being pushed are addictive, but are no good for us. So how to deal with problems like that. And on top of that, there are issues related to privacy and security and fairness, bias, transparency, explainability. So it feels like, wow, AI is really not in a good state to address these issues. So my general view is that we need to put the smart AI researchers' minds on these problems, as opposed to complaining about it, not using AI, or have governments regulate AI so much that they become useless. And I think traditionally, technology problems are almost always primarily solved by technology solutions. When electricity first came out, people got killed being electrocuted, but circuit breakers were invented to circumvent that. And when PCs were first connected to the internet, viruses were terrible, but antivirus software addressed and solved that. Y2K problems and so on and so forth. So my main message is there are potentially technology solutions for these. For privacy data, personal data issues, there are technologies in an area called privacy computing. And there are, for example, one technology called federated learning allows us to only have our data in computers and devices that we trust, such as our phone, our home server, or maybe a hospital's computer that we entrust our patient record to. And then AI can still be learned over all hospitals, but no hospital releases patient data beyond its servers, but it builds models that are combined across hospitals. So that's a technological solution that addresses personal data, perhaps in a way that's even better than GDPR and its descendants. And another example is in bias and fairness. I believe AI tools could be built to alert AI researchers and engineers that the data is imbalanced. It will cause bias problems, just like compilers tell programmers when there are bugs. AI researchers would be informed and warned, or maybe even stopped from building AI that has inherent fairness issues. And then lastly, on the externality problem that's well argued in the documentary Social Dilemma, I think it's really a double-edged sword caused by the objective function. I mean, AI is so powerful because it can, given an objective function, it can maniacally optimize so that it delivers some positive number on the objective function, such as maximizing click-through, eyeballs, revenue. And that's what allows the internet company to take advantage of us, the users, because it's maximizing its metric, not worrying about our metric. So I believe there can and should be research to look at how to maximize long-term benefit to end users, such as was this website or this newsfeed time well spent? Is it making me happier, wealthier, or more learned as a result? And there are ways these things can be measured and combined alongside with the goal of making money. And then I think if there are either public sector, government, or private sector watchdog that ensures these internet companies are catering to longer term needs of the users, not just maximizing money on a day-to-day basis, that I think would go a long way. So those are my technological beliefs, and they are manifested in the stories in different ways. In the first story, opening of the book, Golden Elephant, shows a story of how an insurance company, through many apps, actually bring back a serious racial problem in India that ostensibly was already solved, but the data inherently was able to sort of reverse engineer the caste issues that's the government and the culture and the country solved, but it's still inherent in the society. And AI learned the specific number combinations to try to keep two lovers apart, because it maximized their insurance situation. And that describes the problem from the beginning. And then in some more complex situations, the Isle of Happiness talks about an emir in a Middle Eastern country who wants to build an objective function to make everyone in his little kingdom, small island, happy. So various sensors were built in to detect when people smile and have the right combination of heartbeat and blood pressure and pulse and sweat and hormones and endorphin and so on. And then to create stimuli that help people maintain their happiness. And then they discover that that could be done, but maybe that isn't what truly happiness means. So that's another example of describing how the future might be. What's missing is which technology will work to make complex long-term objective functions. I feel optimistic. That's a fairly constrained problem that in 20 years we can make a lot of progress. So I cannot predict which algorithm will work, but it seems like a very positive direction that can use technology to reduce the externalities created by technology. So we don't have to put all the eggs on the regulation bucket and hope that breaking up internet giants is the only way to achieve software that will care about the users.
You've highlighted, Kai-Fu, that artificial intelligence is already getting involved in uh, many human resources activities, interview screening, negotiation, hiring, training, employee evaluation. You've talked about how major aspects of finance, legal, sales, marketing can be taken over by artificial intelligence. I've heard you reference that in 5-year waves, the next 5 years, many of the repetitive operations or tasks are going to be taken over by artificial intelligence. The next 10 routine activities, and ultimately optimizing activities in the next 15. Can you talk a bit about what some of the aspects that need to be introduced in order for those different breaks to happen, the 5, the 10, the 15, between repetitive, routine, and optimizing? What's to come that will lead to greater adoption to take over these sorts of tasks?
Yeah, I think AI will learn to do human tasks when there is data from which to learn. So and often white collar jobs are replaced before blue collar jobs because white collar jobs can be simulated by software. And I think COVID has demonstrated that when we work from home, corporations are seeing the workload becoming digitized and compartmentalized, and they're starting to see which individuals and which groups of individuals aren't so much pulling their weight based on their workflow. And when people work from home, the work can be outsourced to lower cost countries. It can also be outsourced to software processes. So the idea is we can see in technology called RPA, and that's already largely taking over more and more jobs, even though some companies in that space don't admit they're taking jobs, but they clearly are. They're being sold in, robots who do the workload of people who do repetitive white collar work. So the more repetitive, the more routine, the easier the job is to replace, and that's kind of the beginning. And then longer term, any job that's optimizing, you could say something pretty advanced, like a quantitative hedge fund manager, or an actuarial expert in an insurance company. That's probably not very easy to replace them in the next 5 to 10 years. But the work they do is quantitative in nature. And one could also say that basically anybody who picks stocks based on any data that's available, rather than strategic thinking, intuition, or knowing the people, that those jobs are going to be gone. So we can plot that on the white collar jobs. In the blue collar job is a little bit different, because there's also issues about human dexterity, hand-eye coordination. However, an AI technologist can easily plot all the jobs in a factory, starting from visual inspection to moving things around. You can see already in Amazon warehouse, right? They move the shelves already is done by AI. So the feet, the grabbing, or the hand is still done by human, but annually the picking contests, robots are picking better and better. So those jobs are going to be gone. So you can almost plot out based on the technological difficulty which jobs will be gone in blue collar. And in 20 years, they'll also largely be gone. So that is something is inevitable. So the retraining needs to start as soon as possible.
Last time you and I spoke, Kai-Fu, it was on the heels of your last book, Artificial Intelligence Superpowers, AI Superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, and the New World Order. And I'm curious, in the past 3 years, a remarkable 3 years for a whole range of reasons, how things have evolved, especially in terms of artificial intelligence leadership in various ways between, say, China and the United States. What sorts of developments have you seen that have either continued to sort of prove your hypotheses versus perhaps some changes that have happened across the years as well?
Yeah, in my first book, AI Superpowers, I talked about 4 waves of AI, and US having an inherent advantage in some areas and China having advantages in the other areas. And I think that's proving to be true. So if we look at, for example, in enterprise software, COVID has really pushed the US into making work from home work. And AI plays a significant role in that, because as COVID pushes for the digitization of the workload, AI can be applied to that digitized data. So we're seeing AI really taking off in the enterprise space in the US. In China, manufacturing is kind of the most important activity. So robotics in manufacturing is an area that is probably pushing China farther ahead. And that use of robotics, although simple robotics, is doing work in the factory, but also starting to see that happening in the commercial as well as in the consumer space. So there are smart robotic toys coming out, dogs that look like Boston Dynamic dogs are starting to be sold for very low prices in China. Robots deliver my groceries to me within my apartment building. And in restaurants, these robotic waiters are coming out. This is pretty popular. It's probably one out of several, 10 restaurants at the Midland and below I go to use some sort of robotic technologies. So robotic is big in China. Autonomous vehicles, both countries are still pushing farther. US is probably doing more the Waymo robo-taxi style. China is pushing more for trucks and buses. So we'll see how that plays out. And healthcare is a big one where both countries are making significant advances, combining it with drug discovery and smart diagnostics for eye doctor, for using it in robotic surgeries, for uses in radiology and pathology. So healthcare, I think, spans both countries and, in fact, the whole world. And that's probably the area where I can see the greatest progress and probably even some collaboration across countries, because that's something COVID has made us suddenly extremely aware and maybe frightened and also motivated to push for more advances so that as we care more about our health.
Well, Kai-Fu Lee, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, the book is AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future. Congratulations again on a great work yet again. And it's wonderful to speak with you as always.
Thanks for having me.